capacity Turkey has to accomplish that objective. This is where we see many challenges, and this is where also we see many disagreements between Turkey and the local actors and Turkey and the international actors, including the United States. For instance, ideally, if Turkey were able to realize its ambitions for such a regional order, it would have to be built on the participation of the key regional actors. So it should be sort of based on regional solutions to regional problems philosophy, where the regional actors are playing the lead role in terms of managing economics, politics, and security affairs. But we know that because of the disagreements in the region among the key actors, but because of also the international actors' policies, Turkey is alone, far from realizing such a regional order. And the case of Syria and recently the case of Iraq again, once again, demonstrated very clearly that in this difficult transition, Turkey directly faces first order the security externalities of this regional vacuum of security governance. And I guess this was what Minister Ala was also referring to. Turkey was the first country to face the externalities from the region, whereas in the West, the effects of what go on there might be felt a little bit later. So this is where I think the experience of Turkey is important. When we talk about Turkey becoming as a potential role model, I think there is a sort of interesting mistake being made in those analyses, where we are mostly focusing on democratization as the cornerstone of that model discussion. To me, I have been arguing in my own writings that rather than democratization per se, the key issue here is the state building process, which we need in the Middle East, and this is where Turkey could share some experience with the region, and this is actually what Turkey has been trying to do in Iraq and in Syria as well. In that sense, the Turkish policy in Syria since the start of the crisis in 2011, and Turkish policy vis-à-vis Iraq, especially since the American invasion. Before the American invasion was always based on this similar understanding that we need to work toward state building, for which we need national reconciliation in Iraq. And if you could remember the events in 2006 in Anbar province, when there was insurgents, Turkey played a very instrumental role in bringing the Sunni tribes into the mainstream. And this is how Americans supported their counterinsurgency with a sort of state building process. And there was a chance to accomplish it, but unfortunately the policies pursued by the Maliki government since then, and especially Americans sort of disinterest after the leaving from Iraq expanded that chance very irresponsibly. And this is where I think, for instance, one of the criticisms we used to hear before about Turkish foreign policy, you also raised a similar criticism, whether Turkey has moved from zero problems with neighbors to zero neighbors. This was where I think, again, there was another
zero friends. I think it's still in the region.
There was another misunderstanding in that discussion as well. When Turkey was, for instance, criticizing Maliki, and it was immediately attributed to Turkey acting with a sectarian agenda because we were supporting Hashimi or we were supporting the Kurds. But again, Turkey's point back in those days was to underline the necessity to keep the Sunni groups within the Iraqi mainstream politics. And when we were trying to bolster ties with the Kurds in Iraq through the energy deals, again, the idea was to make them a constituent and capable part of a functioning Iraq, not to undermine the territorial integrity of Iraq. And today we see that the Kurds are seen as, again, sort of a remedy to the security threat. But let's assume that the energy pipeline, the oil pipeline that has been now operational, wasn't there. Would the Kurds have been so much able and willing to stand against the ISIS advance? I think it would have had a different situation. So what I am trying to say is that in the region, Turkey's main vision is based on this state building as a key component of the region building, regional order building. And in the Middle East, unfortunately, the regional order has been going through a tough phase. and it was already mentioned, the debate about the end of Sykes-Picot order in the Middle East. This is up there, and we don't know how it will unfold, but the way I have followed it is the following. I see that in this process, the borders in the region are open for discussion. It doesn't mean disintegration of states, but the borders are becoming ever more irrelevant, and the national states are unable to maintain control over borders and exercise authority over the entire of their country. And we see the rise of multiple non-state and sub-state actors in this process. And most importantly, we lack an effective conflict resolution mechanism that was based on regional actors, but in the same process, we also see the decline of American interest in the region, the decline of international actors. So I have been always arguing for this point. In order to maintain a regional order, you need a mechanism to suppress violence. This is what we miss now. So in this sense, there is a vacuum of security governance, and Turkey on its own is unable to do so. And then the challenge in Syria was more or less about it, and the challenge now also in Iraq are more or less a new reiteration of the same risk. On its own part, since the start of the Arab Spring, Turkey had what I used to call an engagement policy, while most international actors, especially the Americans starting from 2012, preferred a containment policy, trying to stay away from it. But this is where we had a lot of discussions with the Americans, with the West. This was one of the reasons why perhaps we had the discussion about what groups to designate as terrorists, what groups to designate as just opposition fighters, because when you are sitting in the region, you feel the negative effects of the situation much more differently than other international actors. And then Turkey, in the second phase of the Arab Spring, where these security challenges are more obvious, still adopts the active engagement policy, and this is where, again, we see some disagreements between the containment approach of the West. I have been personally, again, arguing that the containment approach is unsustainable because of the spillover effects of Syria. Syria alone, if the entire Syrian society, this infrastructure, the state was disintegrated, it may not have been a big challenge on its own, but the regional implications of Syria, we discussed it, you remember, in 2012 in the autumn, the annual Middle East Institute conference, we discussed the challenge of Syria. Unfortunately, we are experiencing that situation, the regional repercussions, and this is where we see the effect of Syria for Iraq as well. And then Turkey still insists that there should be more active engagement in order to undermine the instability in Syria. And I would like to, I have another minute or so, to come back to Mr. Ambassador's account of the way Turkish foreign policy in Syria has unfolded, because I personally have followed it while writing different reports and articles on that. And in our classes, we usually say the ambassadors have one weakness. When they are posted to somewhere, they see the things from a native perspective. They see the trees, but perhaps miss the forest. And this is where I think his account of the way Turkish approach has evolved in Syria is a little bit missing some essential parts of the story. And he's right, the Turkish embassy posted in Damascus might have had limited ties and contacts with the opposition from the beginning of the Syrian uprising back in 2011. But outside Syria, Turkey was actually really having deep ties. And then the opposition organized in Turkey, in Istanbul, in March, April 2011 already. And even before Foreign Minister Davutoğlu visited Damascus in August, in April already, the Prime Minister Erdogan sent the Chief of Intelligence Fidan and other officers as sort of go-betweens between the opposition and the regime. And even back then they proposed some reforms. Assad indeed did deliver reforms before the August deal. In May, he announced that other parties could run. He gave some rights to the Kurds. So there was again some Turkish intervention there. But he's right. I agree with his assessment that, especially after Ömer Onhun observed the withdrawal, actually it didn't take until September. In 2 days, the deal was broken by Assad himself. The conclusion the Turks drew from that experience was that talking to the Assad and finding a mediated solution was impossible. This was the day when the Turkish approach changed, and increasingly, and since then, and still has been based on Assad leaving the power as a precondition for any political settlement. About the trade as well, the regional impact on Turkey's provinces bordering Syria has been the most visible, but still, from an economic point of view, I was there last 3 weeks ago, and we published a report in my think tank on Syrian refugees as well. Actually, the economic impact could be debated. Right. Now, when you look at the trade figures, because of the international aid assistance flowing to Syria through Turkey, overall we recaptured the trade figures. And in domestic economy, because of the refugees, also because of the flow of Syrian capital out of Syria, you see some flourishing economy. It is not necessarily having a terrible economic impact.
All right. Thank you very much for your talk. Thank you.